I'm indebted to a number of really gifted and fine scholars and writers as I kind of got ready for this week. I've been reading a number of different people, Jim Harnish and Maxie Dunham and Dave Wilkerson, Warren Wiersbe, just a bunch of different writers trying to get as many perspectives as possible on what I wanted to share with you about. And so quite honestly, I'm going to try to give credit where credit is due. This is a lot of the thinking of some really smart men and some really smart ladies. And so I'm grateful that their resources are there as they help me kind of get ready for today. When was the last time you went through a dry spell in your relationship with the Lord? Notice I didn't ask if you've gone through a dry spell, because I know all too well that everybody at one time or another we just go through these periods where it just doesn't seem as vibrant and it doesn't seem as exciting, and we just feel dry. And if anybody's come here today like that, then here's my word for you. You've come to a really good place, and you're getting ready to hear a timely word. And so there's good news. But, maybe you just came out of one and, you're feeling better now and you feel more alive. Then maybe this will fortify you, and maybe, just maybe, you're getting ready to go into a dry place and you don't know it. And so there's words here today. You guys understand the feeling, and you guys know the emotions of getting in that place, though? When you go through a period where it just doesn't seem like you really get a hold of God, or maybe you feel like you're just kind of going through the motions, and, church just kind of feels like, well, I went to church. What'd you do this weekend? Oh, I went to church. Make it sound like you're going to the dentist to have a tooth pulled. And we just kind of go through the motions about things. And, people that are in a dry spell, they can literally just come to church and sit in church and feel absolutely nothing. And all around them, everybody else is happy and joyful, and people are being blessed, and God is speaking to them, and yet sometimes, we go home. I know I've been there. I've actually preached sermons where I've left out of worship, and maybe you were excited that you heard something good, and I've left out of worship dry, even though I preached. And I left out feeling more empty than when I came in. And it's just it just seems to happen to us. And maybe you'll get through a period in your life where you just don't really have a desire per se to read the Bible. And if you read it, it's out of obligation and not out of desire. There's times in our lives where we just don't particularly really want to pray. And we don't pray. And maybe the only praying you're doing right now is praying for your meals. And maybe you've stopped praying for your meals and just sit down and gobble up. And it happens. Or if you do pray, you pray because you're supposed to pray. And pretty soon, when you stay dry for this amount of time, you'll start feeling like giving up. You'll start thinking that it just doesn't matter anymore. And you'll get blown along and dragged along by life. And the worst thing that'll happen is you'll start comparing yourself to brother so-and-so who stands up in the glory of God and testifies. And you'll be sitting there looking at him going, I right now would like to be anywhere else than listening to Brother Bob Blessing testify. You know what I'm saying? Because you can get in that place in your life. And what do they look like? I was thinking the other day, this is getting sort of depressing. I've been in ministry now for 30 years. Guys, I'm getting old. And I started thinking, I've been in some type of ministry for 30 years, and I started looking back over some of the conversations I've had with people over the years. I think back and reflect to a conversation with a guy that told me, he said, I'm working so hard and I'm staying so busy working that I'm working on everything but my soul. I remember that conversation like it was yesterday. I remember another guy talking to him, and I hadn't seen him in a while, and I said, hey, man, how you doing? What's going on with your life? He said, not much. I said, how's church? How's your church doing? How's things going there? And he looked at me straight face and says, oh, man, he goes, I'm hiding in church right now. I'm just hiding. You know, I'm showing up, but I'm not doing anything else. And I think about people, you know, there are people that are Christians that just, their Christianity goes through periods where it only consists of showing up on Sunday morning. And that's it. Nothing else. No fellowship, no prayer, no devotional time, no service, no nothing. It's just showing up Sunday. And so it's possible to be there. And if you're there today, you're not alone because others have been there. But the point is to get out of being there and to move back into a place of blessing. Now, when you get to that point, Maxie Dunham's got the best phrase I've ever heard for it. It's called soul drain. When you arrive at that place where there's soul drain, when you're drained out of all your resources, when you're empty, when you have no hopes, when you're disappointed about things because things didn't work out, and all you've got left, every bit of the energy that you got left, it just takes that energy to get out of bed, and then once you get out of bed, you just get pulled along by life. You guys ever been there? Y'all, come on, come on. Have you been there? I've been there, haven't you? I have. And I think many of you have. I remember years ago when I was at my last church, we had this, right on the line of trees at the back of our property, we had this gigantic propane tank. It looked like a giant peel sitting out in the backyard. And it's just the biggest propane tank. And about twice a year, the guy would come and, you know, we heated with propane, and he would come and fill it up. And it was an old guy. He would classify what I call a codger. I mean, this guy was an old guy. Is that a bad word I just said, or are you pointing at somebody you know? Okay. 39 years of marital bliss to a codger. Oh, my goodness. This old guy, boy, if I said something really bad just now, I apologize. But, yeah. But this guy was amazing. He could get out of that truck, and he'd walk over to this thing, and he would, like, touch it here and touch it there, and he'd tap on it a couple of times and put to the bottom of it and push on it, and he'd look at me, and he'd say, 40 gallons. And I used to just laugh. This dude had filled up so many tanks, he'd pinged at his finger against it, and he could tell you about how many gallons were out of it and how many needed to go in it. And I'd sit right there. Every time he came, I'd sit and wait for him to watch him fill it up. And I'm telling you, he would get within 5, 6, 7, 8 gallons of it every single time. And of course, I understood, you know, when he touched it, when he hit it, when he did whatever he did, he was listening for something. He was listening for something. And when he heard a certain sound, he knew it was really low. And here's what happens. You know what? If we could just put our hands on our lives sometimes and just ping our finger against our lives, we'd hear that hollowness, wouldn't we? We'd hear that emptiness. We would hear that kind of weightlessness, and we know what it feels like. And you know what? As I'm getting older, I can pick it out in other people. I can spot it in people. I can see when people feel hollow. Flip Wilson said beauty is skin deep, didn't he? And what else did he say? Ugliness does what, y'all? Goes all the way to the bone, doesn't it? Guys, I want to tell you something. Soul drain goes all the way to the bone, doesn't it? It goes deep. It goes deep. Now, word of admonition to you today. Extended dryness is a dangerous place to be in. It's a rough place to be in. It's a dangerous place. Why? Because when you get to that point in your life and you stay that way for a long time, that's where people begin to fall from the faith. That's where people begin to backslide. And listen what else happens. That's when you start making reckless decisions. And that's when you start making costly decisions with your life. When you're so dry that you no longer have God's Spirit moving through you so you can make smart decisions. So watch out. It's a dangerous place to be. Howard Macy was right. Look, religion without passion is a deadly fraud. The heart's got to throb for God. So we want our heart to be moved by God and full of God and throbbing for God, as Howard Macy says. By the way, here I'm going to read some scriptures to you today, and tell me if these maybe these express the need of your heart. The 3rd Psalm, verses 1 and 2. Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My body longs for you in a dry and weary land where there is no water. You guys have been in the dry and weary land, haven't you? And the soul begins to thirst for God. I've seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. God, I'm thirsting for you. God, I'm longing for you. I'm eager to see you. I want to see your power, and I want to see your glory. God, I'm after that. How about the 42nd Psalm? Here's another one from a familiar psalm. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you. Oh God, my soul thirsts, oh God, for the living God. When can I go and meet with God? I've been there before, and so have you. Or the 143rd Psalm. How about this one? I spread out my hands to you. My soul thirsts for you like a parched land. I spread out my hands. God, oh God, I need you. Oh God, I'm thirsty for you. Do you guys remember the first question that God ever asked man? You remember the first question he ever asked him? Remember it? Where are you? Where are you? And you remember, he didn't ask the question because he needed to know where they were. He needed for them to know where they were, right? And we already know where they were. Adam was hiding in the bushes, wasn't he? Well, I've been Adam sometimes. I've been hiding in the bushes, thinking I'm going to get away from God. And see, here's what I know from Scripture. God's desire is for fellowship with me. God doesn't want sin to separate me from Him. God doesn't want barrenness to separate me. God doesn't want brokenness to separate me. And God doesn't want spiritual dryness to separate me from Him. And so every so often, He comes and He whispers in my ear, hey, Eric, where are you? Where are you? And by the way, I don't like to hear the question because I know where I'm at. So, well, I promised myself I'd be really positive today, so I'm going to give you 2 solutions. And I'm grateful, like I say, to a number of writers because this is some of their thinking and some of the stuff I put together with it. But I want to give you a long-term solution, and I want to give you a short-term solution. This is not a good news, bad news thing. This is all good news. But I want to give you a long-term solution to something, with a passage of Scripture from Mark chapter 2, verse 27. And I want to show it to you really quick. Then He said to them, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Now, here's what I want to say to you. If you're really, really dry in your spirit, then you have a gift that you need to start receiving in your relationship with Him, and that is the gift of the Sabbath. You need a Sabbath. You need to start experiencing a Sabbath. Because part of being dry is just not taking time to take care of your soul. And you need a Sabbath. You've got to have a time when you give God time. You have to have a day when you do 2 things. And remember, gang, the Sabbath is built for 2 big things: rest and reverence. And so you've got to have a day where you put the brakes on. You've got to have a day to rest and a day for reverence. A day to understand what God wants from you. A day to understand His will and to follow His teachings. You've got to have a day of worship and a day of rest. How many of y'all remember Devin Bobbitt? Devin used to say to me all the time, he'd tell me this every time we talked, Eric, man, worship's not something I got to do, it's something I need. It's something I need. And he would tell me that all the time. He'd say, Eric, I got to worship. I need to worship. Guys, I'm going to tell you something. Worship is something we need. We need it. Our spirit craves it. Regular worship, I'll tell you what it does. It'll prepare you for life. It'll prepare you for hard times. You got to have times where you worship. And here's what's amazing. When you get together and worship, God starts speaking to you. He never talks to you about what you're capable of doing. He only talks to you about what you're called to do. And see, once you know what you're called to do, and you go out and do it, you'll find you're capable of doing it. And see, here's what's happening. We got a lot of people that never worship, so they're running around doing all kinds of things that they aren't called to do. And they're finding out as they're doing it, I'm not capable of doing it. And all it does is just create stress in them, and it drains them because they're not doing what they're called to do. If you're called to do it, you're capable of doing it. But one of the best ways to learn about what you're called to do is to get together with other Christians and worship so God can speak to you. Years ago, I was preaching in a church in Virginia, and I remember it just like it was yesterday. I was preaching a sermon about walking through the door. And I'll give away the sermon because one day I'll preach it to you. But I was preaching a sermon about your life, you can walk through 3 doors. You can walk through the door of caring, the door of sharing, and the door of daring. And the door of daring is simply this. That's when you step out and walk through a door where you do something you never, ever possibly visualized yourself doing. Like going to the mission field or becoming a minister or doing some job that you thought, I never could do that. Or doing something grand, so beyond yourself. And that day I shared about the fact that I said, one of the most exciting things is to go through the door of daring and have no clue what's going to happen when you get on the other side. And the sermon was over with and worship was over with, and I went on my way. And about 6 months later, I met this guy who I had known for several years, and he had just started into the ministry. And he looked at me, and here's what he said. Hey, Eric, he said, you remember that day you were preaching up in Virginia? I said, yeah. I said, you were there. He said, yeah. He said, when you challenged us to go through the door of daring, he said, right there in worship, as I was sitting there, God spoke to me and said, I need for you to go into ministry. I'm calling you to ministry. Now, this has nothing to do with me whatsoever. It doesn't even matter. Anybody could have been preaching. But that guy was in worship, and he was listening for God, and God called him to ministry. And by the way, he's still in ministry today. And he heard it in worship. When somebody just said, hey, look, there's a door. It's open, and you need to go through it. It's a door you never imagined possible. You see, the most amazing things happen in worship. God speaks in amazing ways when we worship. And so I can't tell you how important it is to have a day, to have a Sabbath. And the other thing, do I need to tell you that you need to rest? Right? Guys, do I need to tell you that I can trot you out 1,000 surveys and 1,000 studies that show if you work 7 days a week around the clock and go and go and go, you will not be as effective as somebody who works less? Do I need to trot those studies out for you? No. And you want to know why you're running on deficit? Well, yeah. Hey, take a nap. Hey, sit down, rest. Look, what life does to you only depends upon what life finds in you. And I'm going to tell you what, worship puts stuff into you that nothing else can. The Sabbath puts something into you that nothing else can. See, the Sabbath, it puts something into your spirit, and it puts something into your body, and it touches your whole man. Is that practical Christianity or what? I don't know how much more practical I can be. to say to you that maybe the best thing for you to do is start celebrating a Sabbath. By the way, my Sabbath is Monday. Because right now, this is not a Sabbath. My Sabbath is Monday. That's a long-term solution. I want to give you a short-term solution. And it's found in Jesus' teaching in Mark chapter 1, verse 29 through 37. A very familiar story of Jesus being pressed on all sides. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon, and Andrew, Simon's mother-in-law, was in bed with a fever, and they told Jesus about her. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. And then the fever left her, and she began to wait on them. And that evening after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and all the demon-possessed, and the whole town gathered at the door. No pressure, gang. No tension, no stress, right? And Jesus healed many who had various diseases, and he also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. Very in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. We've talked about this sermon recently. We talked about Scripture recently. Remember I said most of us would have slept in late? Not Jesus. He got up early and went and found a solitary place to pray. And then, of course, they come and they look at him and they say, hey, Jesus, we don't know if you know this or not, but everybody's looking for you. And I told you guys that day, listen, there's going to be days when everybody's looking for you, when everybody's going to need you. But here's what I want to say to you. You want a short-term solution? Here's what needs to happen. You need to find a place and you need to get busy praying. You need to find a place. Find a prayer closet. Look, we try everything but prayer, don't we? I mean, guys, what do? I'm so dry. Well, let's go to the Christian bookstore and buy a book. Well, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to read a 400-page book, a how-to book, big, thick one, with no pictures in it, with confusing diagrams, right? I mean, we look for formulas for success. If we're down, what do? We call up our friends. Hey, I just want to talk. And your friend is sitting there holding the phone away from them going, oh, no, I'm so busy. Y'all, come on, y'all done that. We go to our friends. We go to ministers. We go to counselors. There's nothing wrong with that. But we start looking for comfort and we start looking for advice. And Dave Wilkerson is right. We're dry because we've neglected that secret place of prayer. We've neglected that time away where it's just us and God and we just let it all flow out. Which is why I firmly believe this, and I've said it to you 100 times, and I'll probably say it to you 100 more times. Prayer is not something you do. It's always a place you go. It's where we go. Now, there's a danger in dryness because it's actually lukewarmness after a while. It's that growing coldness, and it's that drifting along. And I tell you what, it's caused primarily because we never find the holy place. We never do like Jesus. We don't go out in the middle of the dark and find a place to start praying, to get renewed, to get energized, to be full of the Spirit. Look, you can keep going like you're going, and you're going to have problems. And pretty soon, you're either going to quit attending worship altogether and quit being part of a church, or you're just going to be miserable. And so it really comes down to an attitude of the heart and an attitude of the Spirit. And nothing probably encapsulates it as well as Isaiah. Isaiah 30, 15 through 17. This is from the Message, and this translation is crazy. I just want you guys to read it. God the Master, the Holy of Israel, has this solemn counsel. Your salvation requires you to turn back to me and stop your silly efforts to save yourselves. Listen, guys, you want to see about this? Now look, your strength will come from settling down in complete dependence on me. Y'all, that's it. I don't even need to read any more of the verse because that's where I wanted to stop. Your strength will come from settling down in complete dependence upon God. Okay? And it's in the silent place, in that secret place, where you and I just settle down and say, God, this is all yours. This is all yours. Now, there's one other thing that happens in the secret place, and I'm going to finish with this, and then I'm done. Sometimes when you get in the secret place, I tell you exactly what you need to do. Bill Gothard nailed it in his book. Here's exactly what you need to do. You need to find yourself a quiet place. You need to find yourself a place where nobody's looking, where nobody can see you, and you need to yell out loud. Y'all are sitting there looking at me like going, he's finally snapped. He's finally gone crazy. No, because we started worship today with the 18th Psalm in verse 6, and here's what it says. In my distress, I called to the Lord. I cried to God for my help. Listen, one of the best things you can do is find somewhere away from looking eyes and from listening ears and let it go. Several months back, one evening, it was dark and nobody was out here and nobody was looking around. I snuck across the bridge right there and walked down the edge of the walking path and then snuck around the backside of where the wheat was just planted, and I walked over where all the deer tracks are at on the edge of the woods and the far edge of the woods, and I got about, just a few feet into the woods where nobody could see me and looked around to make sure none of you were watching. And I tell you exactly what I did. I yelled at the top of my lungs, God! That's what I said. Yeah, I woke y'all up. I woke y'all up. Dead serious. I got out there and I screamed as loud as I could. God! Do it. If you think I'm crazy, try it. Try it. Go find yourself somewhere. Get in your car and drive down the road where everybody just thinks you're listening to music. And I'm telling y'all, scream, cry out loud to God and start talking to God. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You're going to find something happening to you in a way that you hadn't thought about. It lifts you up like nothing else will do. If you'll cry out to God. I mean, literally, cry out to Him. And the only way I know how to describe it is this. Every so often, you get so much junk built up inside of you that you just got to force it out. You just got to cry it out. And the only way I know to describe it to you, sometimes it just feels like there's black tar in there, and you just got to get it out of you. And so I hollered out loud while I was out there. And I talked to God about all kinds of things. I talked to God about stuff that was bothering me. I talked about God. I told God stuff. I told God where I wanted to do better. I told God where I was hoping He would do better. I had a conversation with the Lord. I told Him, I said, I don't like how this is going. I want this to change. Can you help me? And I'm telling you guys, if you get out there and if you cry out, you'll be shocked at what happens. I don't mind telling you, it's the tears will flow. They won't just flow, they'll gush out of you. And so will the crud that's in you. And God will come near. And in the end, that's really what you're after, right? I mean, you want to know that God's with you, don't you? And you want to feel God's presence, and you want to know God's with you. Don't you guys want that? And maybe you want that today. And so God's available. Long term, practice a Sabbath. Short term, find a place, cry out to God. Cry out to God. And God comes in. If you're here today and you're dry, The good news is God knows, and God's here to answer. God's here to work in your behalf. But He needs for us to quit trying to make things happen ourselves and completely depend